What exactly is a drone? Some may tell you that a drone is a surveillance tool designed to watch over nations. Others might say it's a machine designed purely for delivering products. Or they might tell you that these innovative machines are something that you mount a camera on and control with a remote. Well, none of these assumptions are inaccurate. But even more probably, they might tell you that a drone is a lethal ghost hiding in the sky, hunting its prey. Drones can be used for literally anything, and we're just now starting to see just what they can be used for outside of military use. As our species advances on a technological level, which is inevitable, we will become more and more dependent on drones or creations such as intelligent robots to take up the tasks of not just our everyday lives, but also fight our wars on an even larger scale than they are now.
Protect Protocol version 5.
Confirmed. Your air mission will start immediately.
Okay, 5, 6, break, push 20 meters.
I have 189 vehicles on the bridge. 480 civilians at this time. No malicious intent is detected.
Moonbeam copies all. Kill ROC. Proceed to waypoint. Uniform. Niner. Scope the tower.
South Tower, showing minimal structural deflection. Traffic density is within predicted parameters.
The United States military currently has hundreds of armed and unarmed drones flying over a dozen countries. By 2018, the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, predicts some 7,500 drones will be present in the United States alone. In the past decade, drones have become synonymous with airstrikes aimed at eliminating terrorist groups overseas, guided largely by the Central Intelligence Agency's targeted killing program. The Bureau of Investigative Journalism reports that between 2004 and 2014, the CIA organized at least 400 drone strikes in Pakistan and killed well over 3,000 people in doing so. And those are just the strikes we know about. It's no wonder that these machines have captured the curiosity and fear of the world. The roots of military drones are deep and have had a history and a mark upon wars dating back almost a century ago, or even later if you consider other factors. But where did these phantoms of the sky come from? To find out, we have to go back at least 100 years. Modern drones, or unmanned aerial vehicles, work through a system of sensors. Think of it as a basic remote-controlled vehicle, except with a much longer range. The exact origin of the military drone is tricky to pin down. World War I saw the first real introduction of aircraft into military service, though things like balloons and kites had been used for decades before. Toward the end of World War I, the US Army was working on what it called aerial torpedoes. Small biplanes, like the catering bug, that would essentially work as kamikaze drones. But the war ended before they could be used. In 1915, in the early months of the Battle of Neuve Chapelle, in France, British armed forces used aerial imagery to capture more than 1,500 skyview maps of the German trench fortifications in the region. This ushered in a brand new era of using aerial imagery for complex coordinated operations. For the first time ever, artillery were able to carry out barrages with advanced knowledge of enemy infantry thanks to aerial mapping. This system continued to develop throughout the war. In 1939, in the very early stages of World War II, the United States produced the very first remote-controlled aircraft called the radioplane OQ-2. unmanned surveillance operations continued playing more prominent roles throughout the Cold War and global conflicts in general. In 1973, after the Yom Kippur War, Israel developed the Mastiff UAV, and soon after, the IAI Scout, again, both unpiloted surveillance machines. In 1986, a joint US-Israeli project produced the RQ-2 Pioneer, a medium-sized reconnaissance drone. Around the same time, Abraham Karim, an Israeli expert engineer who'd spent years working for the IAI, developed a similar prototype called the Nat 750 in his garage outside Los Angeles. American defense contractor General Atomics bought Karim's design in 1990. Fast forward a few years to the early stages of the Bosnian War, and the CAI purchased two Nat 50s for $5 million to deploy in surveillance operations over Bosnia. On January 7, 1994, the Pentagon signed a contract with General Atomics to redesign the Nat 750. Deal to make it bigger, sturdier, quieter, more dynamic. 6 months later, the first generation of the infamous Predator drone was born. The Predator was first flown over Afghanistan in the fall of 2000, when an Air Force team flew one for the CIA in a manhunt for Osama bin Laden. At the time, it was only armed with surveillance cameras. But on December 21st, 2000, the US Air Force received Pentagon approval to arm the Predator with Hellfire missiles, less than a year before the 9/11 terrorist attacks on New York City.
Holy.
Oh my God!
In the immediate aftermath after 9/11, the CIA launched the Targeted Killing Campaign. Essentially, an approval list from the Pentagon to kill whomever they deem perpetrators of the 9/11 attacks. This is legal because of what is called the Authorization for Use of Military Force, a law that the US Congress passed in the wake of 9/11. Enter the strikes. As the remnants of the terror group Al-Qaeda fled out of Afghanistan and into Pakistan and Yemen, the newly armed drones soon followed, quietly. And here's where things really started to get messy. Article 24 of the Charter of the United Nations protects the sovereignty of member states, meaning that they should be free from military incursions during times of peace. But the Obama administration in the US argued that the manhunts were permissible because the intended targets, all affiliated with Al-Qaeda in one form or another, posed an immediate threat of attacks on US soil or US interests abroad.
Actually, drones have not caused a huge number of civilian casualties. For the most part, they have been very precise, precision strikes against Al-Qaeda and their affiliates.
Both the CIA and Pentagon have been relatively quiet about who and where they strike. The Bureau of Investigative Journalism reports that the CIA initiated close to 400 drone strikes in Pakistan since 2004, while the Pentagon executed between 66 to 184 strikes in Yemen, plus 20 more in Somalia.
Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
But really, given the limited information on strikes, it's difficult to pin down the exact number of casualties. Now, the question I've attempted to make all this information so far lead down to is, why use drones to kill? Why now? Think of it this way. In traditional warfare, enemies were easily identified by their uniforms or activities. Now, post 9/11 terrorist groups and related insurgencies instead hide in plain sight, living modestly among civilians and using homes as their command centers.
Kabul suicide bomber caught on CCTV. Newly released security video shows the moment a Taliban suicide bomber entered police headquarters in the Afghan capital Kabul, intent on killing the chief of police. The video shows the bearded bomber dressed in an ordinary grey suit, carrying an unremarkable blue folder.
The sneakiness of drones makes it possible for someone in Washington, for example, to remotely watch over a suspected area, say in Pakistan or Iraq, for months at a time, sifting through the haystack to find the hiding needle from an entire ocean away. Now, while that sounds cool, this just leads to things getting even messier, as with traditional aerial strikes, civilians can also get caught up in the crossfire from drones. The Bureau reports 900 to 1,000 civilians have been killed in Pakistan since 2004, and approximately 200 of them were children. But again, exact numbers are tough to nail down. On September 30th, 2011, the CIA killed one of its own American citizens. Anwar al-Awlaki, a US citizen living in Yemen who had been working for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, was terminated in a drone strike. Some law scholars and journalists criticized the Obama administration for targeting an American citizen, but the US Department of Justice insisted he had been a threat for years to the United States. The ethics and laws of it all are still very largely a gray area. But recently, much smaller and much simpler drones have become recreational or commercialized machines back at home in both Canada and the United States. I personally was able to have a hands-on experience with one of them.
This is what will activate the GPS locator on that, and it has to pick up a minimum of 6 out of 11 satellites in order for it to GPS locate, so start controlling itself. So Mr. Tucker and I got an extended life battery because we feared the flight time was probably about 10 minutes on a good day. Solid light.
Yep.
Now, one of the ways to orient it is you hold it up. You got to do a 360 until the light change color.
Nope.
So then it'll give us a bunch of flashes so that we know it's ready to go.
Solid green light.
Yeah, it usually just does a bunch of quick flashes. Now you can fly without the GPS. It's just that you don't have that security of coming home, right? So it's got a 3-kilometer radius. So the idea is that if it's 2.5 kilometers away, you have no idea where it is, you just hit a button and it flies home. And it's programmed that once it gets out of the signal range, that's where it's programmed to fly home. Now that's just hovering in the air, but throttle up. I'm not holding anything, right? That's the cover. Bring it right down to the maximum corners, and then we'll hold it there. And then this will throttle up. There's a little bit of a tilt to it off the ground, and then if you just let go of the center, and then you can kind of go feel forward. Just gentle moves, like you don't have to. Right, depending on the way you are. Sure. So Lights don't go up, just go side and left or right without moving up or down. And it'll spin. Now there's some green lights on the front, so that's technical front, and there's some red lights in the back, so you get a sense of what's front and what's back. But once you do a 360, you kind of lose orientation, right? So that's the goal for, that's why the camera and the lens comes in handy, because you can see where the drone is and you never lose orientation. Try to see if you can fly it like right over there.
Moving on, just in 2014, Amazon proposed using drones much smaller and much simpler than those being used in the military to deliver packages to customers. In 2015, this has become much closer to being a reality. Real estate agencies have begun regularly using drones for promotional videos, and a burst of small DIY organizations have started creating their own smaller scale machines for recreational flights. Others have used drones for anti-poaching rescue missions in Africa, and as of 2015, medical delivery via drones is still in its testing phase. Even Facebook is building huge solar-powered drones to beam internet into remote areas of the world. The FAA in the US reports over 934 government agencies, from the FBI to US Customs and Border Control, all the way down to small police departments, have been given limited rights to operate unmanned aircraft in domestic spaces. Now, with all this information, Chris Anderson put it best. We are entering the drone age. There's been blowback though. Within the last year, 35 states in the US introduced legislations to limit the use of drones by government agencies, and to this date, 12 more have adopted this legislation. But ironically, despite this, recent polls show that more than half of Americans approve of drone strikes. And overseas, understandably, the overall approval is much lower. Even the Canadian government has regulated the use of drones nationwide. Our government regulates their use to keep the public and our airspace safe. If the drone age is indeed here, what can we expect in the next year? 2 years? 5? If recent trends are any indication, then we might as well get used to seeing them, and having them see us. Thanks for watching.